Good day, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us for this short webinar on Patchbox. We really do appreciate your time. Just a quick overview of what this webinar is all about. So we had a really fantastic Leader Expo recently. With loads of attendees, and Patchbox is one of the really sort of highlight key presentations that we had, but unfortunately not everyone was able to join us at the Leader Expos. We had quite a lot of feedback saying, we'd really like to see some of these seminars and presentations again, and one of them was Patchbox. So here we are, we decided to put it together in a really good webinar, and obviously we can go through this all again, and you guys are more than welcome to ask questions, and I'll answer them as we go through. So I'm going to have a short Q&A at the end, but if you on a particular slide and you've got a query, please don't hesitate, fire away immediately. I do have my questions window open up beside me, and I'll try and answer them as we go through the presentation. So without further ado, let's get into it. So first of all, who exactly is Patchbox and what are they all about? So Patchbox is a European-based company, and they've decided to take the traditional methods of normal data rack cabling and really just turn it on its head. So for anybody who's ever had to do network cabling or network racks before, you've typically ended up with a scenario like this. It obviously looks really nasty and really messy, and I think we've all pretty much been there before. You get to a site, you have to patch a new port in, connect up a server, a switch, whatever it may be, and perhaps you don't have the right length fly lead. Maybe you need a 3 meter, and the only thing you've got in your bag or your kit is a 6 or a 9 meter cable. You just have to make do. So you patch it, you try and neaten it up as best you can, and away you go. But there's a lot of excess cable left hanging around. Maybe you don't have time to really tighten it and neaten it up. So you end up with a sort of slowly progressing mess, for want of a better term. So things just sort of get progressively worse and worse and worse. Now, obviously, this is even worse when you come to a scenario where somebody else has perhaps created the mess, and it's your job to perhaps track down a particular patch or a fly lead and maybe repatch it or connect it, and you've got to try and trace the cable through somebody else's spaghetti wiring mess. It can get very tedious and obviously very frustrating. So Patchbox has redesigned the way that patch cables are traditionally done, and you end up with a much neater solution with the way that their product actually works. So it's a very clever mechanism, which I'll get into shortly, and I'll show you how it all works and fits together. But the ideal and the aim of this is to end up with network data racks and cabinets that obviously are much neater, and second of all, are much faster to actually deploy and install. So that's where we're getting to. So to start off with, just a little bit of history about how did Patchbox really come around. And it was the CEO, or the guy that actually invented the product, Josef Hofstadter. He thought back to the cabling systems of old telephony switchboards, where you actually had ladies that had to physically patch cables in and out. And he thought, well, if these women had to do this all day long, how did they not end up with a massive spaghetti tangled mess? And it turned out that all of their cable systems were weighted. So you can actually see in the photo in front of you here, all of the actual terminal connectors are aiming upwards, and all the cable is underneath the desk with a weight, an actual dumbbell weight on the bottom of it. So as they need the cable, they just pull it up from the desk, patch it in, and when they release it and let go, the cable shrinks back into the gap again. So he thought, that's a really clever idea. Why don't we do this with data cabling systems? And that's how the whole Patchbox sort of product line started to come along. So obviously now we went from horrible spaghetti messes through to proper, neat deployable solutions because of this mindset and because of taking that cable and sort of hiding it away in a nice, neat and efficient manner. So how does this all fit together and how does it work? So the way that Patchbox works is you've got one main sort of cradle, and inside that cradle you can have up to 24 different cable cassettes, and each of those cable cassettes would have an actual patch lead in it, obviously with varying different lengths. You get short ones of 0.8 meters and you get slightly longer ones of 1.8 meters. So for those of you who have really big 42U racks and you need to be able to patch from quite high at the top to quite low down at the bottom, you would go for the longer cable. But most of the time the 0.8 is more than sufficient for getting from a switch to an actual patch panel. So as you can see with the sort of GIF motion that I've got going over there, it's all done in a spring-loaded weight mechanism. So the idea is you can pull out the cable, get the exact measurement you want once you've obviously connected it into the RJ45 port and patched that through, and then all of the excess cable is then zipped back into the cassette. So you don't end up with stuffing cables behind brush panels and trying to hide them in the back of the server cabinet or anything along those lines. It all gets zipped back into the cassette and it gets kept nice and neat. And obviously you can have some really fantastic deployments from there. So this is a really, really great way of deploying this and getting these things running. So as you'd imagine, all of the cassettes are interchangeable. So this is an image of a fully patched panel with full 24 ports all done and sorted, but you can get different cassettes. So you can get different colors. You can also get different cable types. So all of the ones that we sell are Cat6A, which is great. You can use it with PoE and all that sort of thing. You do also get fiber optic versions as well, which are order on demand. So you can get multi-mode, single mode if you particularly work in the fiber optic space. Nothing wrong with that. And as I said, all the cassettes are interchangeable. So you can have perhaps half of this Patchbox rack with Cat6A cables, RJ45, and the other half with single mode, multi-mode fiber cables. You can chop and change to your heart's content, and you can obviously go crazy from there. So it is a pretty well-developed system, and obviously it comes with all sorts of little accessories as well. This one in front of you here is the larger system. It's called the Patchbox Plus. This is the one with the longer cable cassette. So this is the 1.8 meter. You also get the Patchbox 365, which is the same as this, slightly shorter, and it doesn't have the mounting rails on the side. Those mounting rails are only for the larger unit, as you can imagine, just because of the extra weight. And obviously it's become quite popular internationally as well. You can see at the bottom of the screen there, some really prevalent companies are relying on Patchbox for their data center needs. So it's a really, really widely respected and widely used company. I also would like to mention at this point that it's got a full 5-year warranty on every single part and component of the device. So if any of the spring mechanisms perhaps fail, or maybe one of the cables stops working, anything along those lines, full 5-year warranty, you just swap out that cassette with a new one and away you go. So yeah, it's a really great thing from Patchbox side. So obviously the aim of this and what we're really going for is to have a really nice and neat patch panel type of system. So I'm just going to show you a quick video here of how that patch rack actually works. So yeah, you can see the cradle with all of the individual patch cassettes inside. You can see the guy's able to pull out the cable, get the exact lengths that he needs, wrap it around what is called a patch catch, those little plastic side pieces. You'll get a quick glimpse of that in the video in a second. Those patch catches are actually provided as part of the kit, which are really nice. So it's just a nice way to keep the cables around the side of the cabinet and not sort of dangling all over the place. So here you can see I'm racking and stacking the device, obviously, and in a second you'll see a little bit more about the cassettes and how they're labeled. So there's the patch catch, again, included as standard. We do sell those separately if you want to use them with perhaps some other cabling solutions if you'd like. And something that's also quite important to note is these do have cable stoppers in the front of them. So you can actually lock the cable from being zipped straight back into the cassette if you want to. A lot of people get confused with this. They pull the cable out and it doesn't zip back in and they get worried and they go, oh, I've got a faulty product. That's not the case. You've just got to pull that cable stopper out. That activates the spring and mechanism, and then obviously all the cable gets zipped back into the cassette exactly as it's designed to. Of course, full label support as well. You can just chop and change your labels on the front of those cassettes as you particularly need, and then obviously continue patching as you'd like. So I think you'll agree, a really different take on the way that traditional cabling is done. If you take a traditional cabling setup, yes, it's a very cheap process to do. You've got patch leads that are, a couple of dollars now, whereas compared to this, it's a few $100s. But if you have a look at the actual time and that sort of thing it takes you to actually deploy a system like this, that's where it really starts to come into its own. We'll get to the time aspect in just a second. So a little bit more on Patchbox and a few bits and pieces that their products offer. So as we mentioned, in time, it's up to about 8 times faster to deploy. Now, again, I've got a really good video actually highlighting and demonstrating this, which is fantastic. I'll get to that in the next slide. You do actually end up with a lot more space. So instead of, again, using brush panels and things like that to actually tuck away your cables, you end up with that one single-use system that is able to actually deploy the cable and tuck it away all in one. So you end up with half the space used up, which is great. As I mentioned, it's got the full 5-year warranty. The entire system is toolless. You obviously can tighten things up with a 10mm spanner if you want, but you don't physically need tools to actually mount and use the system, which is really good. As I mentioned, all of the cables are standard Cat6a, which means they are fully PoE compliant. So if you've got to use these with camera systems or VoIP systems, anything along those lines, they will happily work with those PoE systems. And something that is quite good to note is, as you'd imagine, if this cable system is really nice and neat and deployed properly, like Patchbox intends, obviously the airflow for your server cabinet is going to be that much better, because you're not going to have cables dangling all over the place, actually choking off that airflow. So that's a really good point to think about. So here's the Patchbox competition. So the guy on the right that you'll see is actually Joseph. He's the designer and inventor and the sort of, sorry, Alex, not Joseph. He's the designer, inventor of Patchbox. And he actually starts racking a system with obviously all of the Patchbox solutions. And then we've got another guy on the left who is a traditional cable installer. So he literally does patching solutions all day long, but in the traditional sense, actually taking patches and fly leads out of the bags, unzipping each one of them, racking and stacking, and going through from there. Now you'll see that you know, on the right, our Patchbox system is totally done in about 30 minutes, because it's one box, you pull it out, you rack it, and you start patching straight away. Whereas on the left, it's individual patch cables. Each one's got to be taken out of a Ziploc plastic bag. Each one's got to have the wire tie unwrapped. Each one's got to be routed and run through the actual cabinet itself. And it just takes a lot of time and process. So you end up with roughly the same result, but you end up with a lot more time spent on actually deploying this situation. So that's one of the main reasons why people have actually decided to go with Patchbox. So even sort of undoes everything and carries on running, which is a great, nice, funny little video that I like playing for people. But it really is relevant. You do actually end up saving hours and hours and hours on deployment, and that's where the true value of the Patchbox products comes from. There are, so that's the general Patchbox devices with regards to their cable management solutions, which is absolutely fantastic. They do have a couple of other products as well, which you may find interesting. And the first one is something they call their Setup.exe. Nice little funky name that harkens back to the sort of, you know, just Windows exe executables. But this little device is, well, not so little, but it's a really clever tool for anybody who's in a data center and actually racks and stacks stuff for a living. So this is kind of like a third set of hands. What this does is it's a little spring-loaded mechanism, snaps straight into the rack, very easy to deploy, and it gives you a really nice portable and movable shelf to actually drop your 1U products onto. It doesn't have to be 1U. You can actually use it for servers and things if you want to. It's rated for easily 15 kilograms plus, and it's a really great product. You can also flip it the other way around and use it as a table for your laptop, because for those of you who have ever been at a data center before, you know, table space and actually having somewhere to put your PC is at a premium, and it's a really great product to have. So instead of having two technicians, one perhaps holding your very expensive switch up while the other one tries to bolt it in, you can actually just have one technician with a Setup.exe mount, and you get the same result. And obviously you don't have to worry about dropping your very expensive switch on the floor. So great little product, and I highly recommend you check them out. And then the last one is the smallest and the cheapest, and by far my favorite. It's called the Dev Mount. Now these things replace cage nuts. So cage nuts are probably the bane of any network technician's existence. They're horrible, horrible little things. They've been around for absolute years, and no one's really thought to redesign them because they're cheap and all that sort of thing. But you do end up ripping your fingernails to pieces every time you want to deploy them. So they're horrible things, and I'm sure there's a couple of you nodding your heads out there thinking the same thing. So again, Patchbox decided to take this, turn it on its head a bit, and completely redesign it. So these are for 1U only. They are thinking about putting together some bigger designs for 2U and 4U for some bigger servers and that kind of thing. But for now, they're 1U only, and they work great for, of course, their Patchbox systems as well as switches. So to show you what these are all about, it's a one-click mechanism with a very clever metal wing, and it literally just pops straight into the rack, snaps in, and away you go. So again, compared to the traditional cage nuts, it obviously saves you a lot of time, but more importantly, a lot of pain and a lot of hassle, because as we know, cage nuts are just absolutely awful. So there you go, it snaps in, and to take it out, it's just one pull of the finger, pop it out, move it somewhere else, and away you go. So to do the same thing with cage nuts, obviously infinitely longer. The next best thing about them is they're totally toolless. You don't need a Phillips screwdriver like you would with the traditional cage nuts. They all come with these hand-tightened hex bolts. Now, hand tighten is usually more than enough. I've actually used these a couple of times myself, and I can tell you that hand tightening is usually more than enough. But if you do want to tighten them up a bit more than that, you certainly can do. It's just a 10mm spanner, and away you go. And then lastly, just to finish off this very quick short webinar, is we actually have some Black Friday specials for those of you that may not be aware. So this is for the 365 cable management systems, i.e. the 0.8 meter ones, which are probably the most popular. They're actually $84 off for this week only. Well, this week and a bit of next week for Cyber Monday. So if you haven't already, please reach out to your account manager. This is a phenomenal deal. And obviously you guys can get your hands on some of these and start deploying and playing with them yourself. They come in two colors, either blue or yellow. It's entirely up to you, and obviously you can go through it from there. So that's pretty much it for the Patchbox webinar. As I think you'll agree, it's a really different product. It's something that I think somebody should have thought about a long time ago, and it really does help. First of all, improve the actual performance of your server cabinet, but also your speed of deployment. And that's probably the most value that you're going to get out of it, is you can actually walk into a cable solution, deploy this, and immediately be up and running in 30 minutes or less. Whereas a traditional system, you're looking at a couple of hours at least, which is great if you're billing your customer. But if your competitors are billing them for 3-4 hours labor and you're able to do the same job and neater for less time, I think everybody wins. Your customer's going to choose your business all day long. So I'm going to move on to some Q&As. If anybody's got any particular questions, please fire away now, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. Nope, I must have done a really good job at explaining everything. I don't see any questions coming through. Okay, nothing coming through as of yet. If anybody does have any queries, whether it be to the actual products or pricing or anything like that, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. My name is Chris Sutherland, so my email is just chris.sutherland@leadersystems.com.au. Feel free to drop me a direct email, and I'll more than happily help you with any particular scenarios you may have. So once again, thank you incredibly for your time. It really is appreciated, and I do hope you all have a fantastic Black Friday, Cyber Monday weekend. And yeah, all the best. Thank you very much.